Welcome to Your Epic Pursuit. I'm Mike Mooney. I'm so glad you're joining us today. This is a space that I've created to dive into inspirational and real conversations with leaders to help and really unpack their leadership journeys that will really help us look at ways to empower and accelerate your journey of leadership and, quite honestly, ways of just living differently. And we're going to do that through the EPIC lens, which is excellence, presence, intentionality, and curiosity. And again, the goal is simply this: we want to be able to share inspiring and empowering ideas, insights, and tools that are going to help you in your journey. And joining us today, I'm so excited. We got Stephen Botino. He is the CEO of Century 21 Triangle Group with offices in both North Carolina and South Carolina. Stephen, it is awesome to have you here with us today. I really appreciate you making the time.
Thanks, Mike. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, absolutely, man. Absolutely. So as I think about real estate, and we were, talking about this a little bit earlier. I can think of a few industries over the last couple of years that have had the chop that you all have had, going from riding the highs of the highs to figuring out how do we continue to manage the business, right? Through circumstances oftentimes that are outside of our control. When you think about it, whether it's rates, it's prices, it's inventory, all those different aspects. I'm curious, like before we kind of dig in deeper to the conversation, like how are things now in the industry? As a leader, what are some of the conversations you're having with your team right now to maybe either keep them, focused on the right things or helping them navigate and be better stewards for their customers? I'm sure there's a lot of conversation happening.
Yeah, it's been a rough couple of years to say the least. There's been significant changes in our industry about how agents get compensated, and to make it even more complicated, we're in the worst sales unit sales in the past 30 years. So we haven't seen unit sales this low since 1995. Even worse than the Great Recession that we had. That's been a constant battle in our industry. So trying to balance the significant changes that are happening, plus the low sales, and trying to keep everyone motivated and moving forward has been the ultimate challenge from the leadership standpoint here. We got to pay our bills, make money, keep our agents happy, and keep our clients happy. And it has been a tough time. We're managing through it. We've got a great team. The industry, I think, is managing through it as well. And typically in our industry, just probably like most industries, the cream will rise to the top and during tough times. And
Yeah.
and sometimes we welcome these challenging times because it does weed out some of them and leaves the rest of us standing to benefit when the bounty does come later, when things do get a little smoother for us in our industry. So.
Oh, without a doubt, because all things are in cycles, aren't they? But it's usually, and it's easier said when you're on the other side of the cycle rather than like in the teeth of it, for sure. I'd have to imagine because you've got again, n- a number of people on your teams out there, not only being looked at for guidance from their customers, but looking to you for guidance of how do we manage this. Um, I'm curious because there's a conversation I've been having with a lot of leaders recently, which is around this idea of control the controllables. How often do we get up and we let the narrative of what's happening externally guide then the input and the narratives we tell ourselves in our heads that then shape the way that we're showing up or the words we're using or the energy that we bring in conversation. So is that something that you talk about with the team around like, hey, this all we can control or it's all we can control and it's these things in front of us?
Yeah. It's really about what we can control. I always tell our agents this, and then I'll go back to what I tell my leadership team. I said, as agents, you control your own market. What I'm saying is, you control the work and the actions you are doing, no matter what's happening around us.
Yeah.
Good market, bad market, your actions will dictate your outcome. And so that part is controllable, your actions. And a lot of times during these tough markets and tough times, people retreat.
Hmm.
They they stop doing the basics that got them to where they need to be because they start to panic and they think they need to do different things. And our thought process is, what do we control?
Yeah.
And I control my time, my effort,
Yeah.
and so if I can continue to push forward doing those things, things will work out. Same with the leadership side. What are the things that we do have control over,
Mhm.
right? In our industry, right, selling units, right? And for me, bringing in and bringing in more agents, because
Yep.
I one of the discussions I had with my team was going back probably about a year and a half ago, is that um, there's always this philosophy in our industry: recruiting solves all problems. And I always fought that.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
I'm like, you know what, guys, recruiting does solve all problems. It's going to solve this problem. And so, what can we focus on? And we started looking at different things that we had absolute control over, what our actions were and what we can do. And and so we started shifting where we put our resources, time, and energy,
Mhm.
and spent more time on those things. And we're seeing the results of that effort, but it took some time and patience and a little bit of frustration along the way.
Some pain, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and and especially the way we run this company too, it's like you're trying to, it's everyone's gotta row the boat in the same direction, or we don't row the boat.
Right.
And so you gotta get everyone on board to do it, uh, eh, you know, get in to do just, "You want me to do what?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I need you to focus on this." And so it is controlling what we can control. I think in our industry, we've gotten a couple side swipes that we weren't expecting.
Sure.
We just got another one. The industry is adopting too, for clear cooperation, and how are we going to deal with that? So it's kind of like with our team, I'm like, okay, with our agents, I need them focused on sales. That's what they can control. Let us go over and worry about the complicated things happening in the industry, and we'll come back and come up with a solution for them. And I said, just keep doing what you do each day, and that's servicing our clients, and helping people get into homes, and sell homes, and that's what they do best. And
Yep.
let us go worry about all these other nuances that are trying to affect our industry. And it seems like one after the other. Everyone's heard of
Whack-a-mole.
the lawsuits and the commission lawsuits and everything that we're still dealing with,
Yeah.
and the settlements. And so it's been a rough couple years, for sure.
Yeah, and again, it probably just feel a bit like whack-a-mole, and these are real issues. It's not that you're trying to like gloss over, and we're trying to say, "Hey, guys, look over here, not over here." I mean, these are real issues that are popping up. What I love that I'm hearing in there is, look, control what you can control, and that's helping people find the solutions to a new home or whatever it is that they're looking for. Let us, and that means that you've had to have built a good level of trust, right, with the team to say, we'll handle the stuff over here and get back to you on how we're going to meet it. I need you to stay focused and not get distracted, and I think
Hmm.
something that a couple things come to mind. One is that I've always said there are only four things that we can control. It's our attitude, our decisions, our behavior, and our energy. It's sort of what do we think? How do we think about it? What do we do with it that we bring into life? And what kind of energy do we bring? Anything outside of that, I really can't control, of what's coming at me. And and the other thought that came to mind, you're talking about the longer game is there's never been a race won in the first lap, right? But plenty have been
Yep.
lost there, and that's
Yep.
that's really, it's why it's called the Daytona 500, right? Not the Daytona 2.5, which is a 500-mile race. So we need you to be like, remember the strategy. Don't veer. Don't get distracted. Don't make some knee jerk reaction because that's where we end up making mistakes, right?
Yeah,
So
I was definitely, guilty of that, especially early on with my Century 21 career, for sure.
yeah, yeah. I think we all have been, right? Because you're in that frenetic mode. It takes that a little bit of time in the seat, to be able to say, okay, let me just kind of put things in perspective. So actually, that's a great segue. Thinking about your journey as a leader, your journey in the industry, because you are a veteran within the real estate industry, seen so much go on, and how you started out. In the field, learning from literally the grassroots to now where you own, a thriving multi-state business. I'm really curious to know though, like, for you as a leader, was there a point or a moment where you made a decision? It was a bold decision, and people seem to question it. Maybe you even questioned it yourself, but it actually played out maybe better than how you thought it would, or maybe in a way that changed the trajectory of your leadership journey or your career? I'm curious if you had one of those.
Sure. Actually, it's not that long ago, and within the last few years, and I'm actually sitting in the office where, well, we were in a different location, but principal where our headquarters are, and our headquarters, and we have 8 different offices across the different states, and this was always the flagship location. And this is where the most sales were. This is where the operations were run out of, and it was slipping under management I had in place, and it continued to slip. In fact, became not the number one office for sales, and wasn't that shiny beacon of the company. I had hired someone. I believe in talent,
Yeah.
talent above just about anything else, and so I hired someone about 4 years ago to fill a position. I created a position for this person. And it was kind of a little bit of marketing, a little bit of operations, but I wanted this person in my organization. And as the management of the office kept slipping, I needed to do a replacement. And so I approached this person who'd never been in a management role before, never managed people before, never had what we call a broker in charge in North Carolina, had that
Right.
position, and asked her to take the role. And at first she was very hesitant to take it. She's like, I don't know, I can do it. I've never done it before, but but I had this a belief
Mm,
that this person could do it. And, she agreed, and it was a little bit of a rough transition because it was a complete learning experience for both of us
right.
in a lot of ways. Um, just skip to the end. She is my number one leader in the organization. In fact, I would say that I have other partners, like other owners in other markets and stuff like that. She's even does a lot of the leadership responsibilities over them for the company. But in the last 3 years, she's transformed this and brought it back to number one office in the company. And she's taken on a lot of other responsibilities, and it's probably my right-hand person when it comes to doing things. And it was just I there was a little bit of gut there, but it's also I love that book, Good to Great. And
Absolutely.
I think it's a really good lesson. And a lot of times it's sometimes, sometimes people will say, well, I've had experience doing this for this long, but that doesn't make them good or qualified at it just because they've had the position. And so I believe if you find the right people with the right talent, the right motivation and drive and energy, they can step into a role. You can teach them what they need to teach, and from there they'll take off, and in turn might even turn around and teach you a little bit. I find that was a decision. People were like, "What are you doing? This is not it's not an easy role. I'm taking my number one office that basically was half of what it used to be,
Yep.
and then handed it over to someone who's never done the job before." And and
That is bold. That is
and
bold, and I'm sure a gut
But
shot.
like I said, I'm a big believer in talent, and I figure if you got the person with the right motivation and the right ego,
Mm,
right? Sometimes there's a lot of ego in our business. When I say the right
really?
ego, like, doesn't have a big ego, because I think you got to check your ego at the door. And a lot of in a lot of different industries, I think that gets in the way. I think if you can check that ego at the door and realize that I'm part of a team,
Right.
whether you might be the manager and you might have employees, or in our case, agents as well,
Mhm.
you're still part of a team.
Absolutely.
And we just have different roles in that team.
Yeah.
And if we're functioning together well, and we're working together well, and we check those egos out the door, we're going to get places.
Yeah.
And just kind of make that racing analogy. I mean, you have a pit crew, you've got your crew chief, you got people that aren't even on the racetrack that day that are part of that team that get everyone where they need to get there to get around the track and hopefully win the race.
The people back at the
And
shop, man. You're exactly right. I mean, it's not just the individual, yet there's also power in the environment to cultivate that type of opportunity to thrive. So what I love about that is your heart to believe in and develop talent. I know that you spend a lot of your time, I'll change that word. You don't spend it, you invest a lot of your time in coaching and helping people get more out of themselves. And probably in this case, more than this person thought that they could actually bring to the party, so to speak, and in the right environment, I'm sure with the right encouragement, clearly they not only rose to the occasion, but they've actually thrived in this culture. I mean, that is a gut check right there, especially when you're thinking about where your office was and the size and what it had become and the vision you had, right? Where others are like, I don't know if that's the right thing, but I know that there are a lot of examples. And you're right. Sometimes people who have been in that seat for a long time and you think would be the obvious choice, they can be a little jaded. They can be a little cynical. They've lost a bit of that fire to say, well, let's try something new. Or what if we did it a different way, right? Because they're just more sort of, I don't want to say rigid, but the experience may be keeping them from, they're more, from a preconception versus being more curious, right? And there's so much power in curiosity, especially if we leave that ego at the door. I think that's great. That is great. So that person's still there and still
A
doing well.
Absolutely. In fact, we just returned from Century 21 leadership retreat, and she was along for the ride, and
Ah,
and so
so
she's
good.
a integral piece of the company. She's actually elevated herself within the Century 21 ecosystem and is looked upon as a strong leader within the US itself. So it's been
Man,
great.
how great is that? I mean, not only for the business, but I think more importantly for that individual, right? That there's this opportunity came forth that they could see themselves, in a different way, see themselves growing, see themselves contributing, see themselves creating impact that the day before you had that initial conversation was probably not even on their radar. Like, how cool is that? You know?
It's pretty cool.
I love it, man. I absolutely love that. Now, if we think about, the market you were just talking about before, and it's a difficult one to be operating in. I'm not just talking about this market today, but even beforehand, as a leader, there are times we have to do some unconventional things, to get either a team or ourselves out of a challenging spot per se. So I'm curious, was there a time where maybe your team or either yourself, you kind of hit a wall. You'd plateaued maybe in performance or the way you were thinking about trying to get the job done, and you did something a little unorthodox that actually like flipped the switch and changed the outcome of where either you or the team were headed.
Sure. I know about a year and a half ago, I was looking at, in our business, you have buyers and sellers, and listings really drive our market. Without the listing, you don't have any business.
Hmm.
And I noticed that our company was slipping more and more, was getting heavier buy side.
Right.
And it's great having the business, it's income, but you have less control, right? If you have more control in the marketplace when you have listings, right?
Hmm.
And so we needed to make a shift. And then how do we make that shift? Because you're dealing with the agents you have, the mindset they have, and the way they're doing their business. Because they're all individual 1099 contractors doing their own thing. And so I got to get all this entire my leadership team on board, then all the agents on board. And so what we did is I had the team um we ran this analysis that said, okay, how many listings would it take, right, to break even? In other words, if we did no other business, how many listings would we need in each office to break even on the P&L?
Love this.
And so we ran this analysis and we figured, okay, this is how many listings per office that we need to break even. This is if we did nothing else, if we
Right.
sold this many listings,
Right.
we pay all our bills. We don't make profit, we just pay our bills.
Yep.
So we came up with this and we came up with this plan and how we were going to attack, and then how are we going to start changing the culture? And it sounds silly. And in real estate, we started off with it was coming into the holidays last year, and we're going to do home for the holidays,
Mm.
and so we launched this campaign. And it wasn't just a contest. Everyone has companies, and I've been part of them and been on the other side of it as a consultant, where you're looking at performance management behavior driven by contests and different performance things. And I'm like, this is not a contest. I mean, we made it kind of a contest, but I was like, this is more of a change of behavior
Mm.
for the rest of our careers, right? I'm going to shift us into being a listing culture organization. And I told my team, this is going to take probably 2 to 3 years. And I said, we're going to start now. We're going to start with this home for the holidays. And we are going to get agents to commit to looking at their business and listen to the listing sides and start making commitments to themselves and to the company. about what they're going to do to drive their listings up. And so we did that. And then going into this year, we have quarterly goals and how we're going to do it. And I'm happy to say that the 2/3 of the company met or passed their first quarter goals.
Wow.
And so, which I was actually, I was optimistic that we could get it, but I was actually surprised that we were.
I was gonna ask you, like, what were your in your mind, what were your benchmarks on that? Did you think any of them would? Because this is new, man. When you're talking about change the behavior, it's easier to get people to change their minds than it is to change their actions, right? Because it takes a longer period of time and just sort of like repetition of the why and the vision. But were you surprised at how quickly it was adopted?
Yeah, I am because in this particular office, by halfway through this quarter, they're going to probably hit all of last year's listings.
By
So
by the end of Q2?
before the end of Q2, they're on track.
Wow. That's
So
incredible. Wait, let me
it
just back up. So you're saying by before the end of Q2, they will have surpassed their listing numbers of what they did in the entire 2024.
yes,
Okay,
and may
let that
and we're
sink
off.
in.
And the other thing that's interesting about that is this quarter our industry is not off to a great start. January was,
Right.
NAR came, our National Association of Realtors came out and said it was the worst January they ever recorded. And unit sales are still down. Inventory is the problem. And like I said, 2/3 of my company met or exceeded their first quarter goals. And remember that goal is the break even. And now, so it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out and how this shifted. But and everyone's like, well, what are we going to do? This was really interesting about this. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, what are we going to do? And how are we going to reward people? And what kind of contest we're going to run? I said, no, this is a shift in culture. I said, you guys, I need you to have a little bit of, this is the conversations that were happening. I'm like, I need you to have a little bit of faith in this. We cannot throw little contests at this and do things. We got to shift behavior.
Mm,
It's like we need them to focus on the right actions and the right activities to drive this. And the reward
yeah.
for the agent
Yep.
is a listing, because a listing's generally could be a 10, 15, $20,000 paycheck. So that's the award. What kind of contest, can I give them, or trophy, or we gave them I forgot, we gave them a little gift card or something like this for the home for the holidays contest.
Yeah.
But if I could double or triple an agent's listing inventory and therefore double, triple, quadruple their income, isn't that the reward? So I'm like, if we get them to focus on the right activities and actions to
Yeah.
get the listings,
Yep.
everyone wins. And so it's just a shift in behavior. And I think we've got a long ways to go yet. I really do think it's going to take all of the 2 years. I wanted, my ultimate goal was to get us to a point where we had more listing than buyer transactions. My ultimate
Mhm.
goal is to get us in that 50-50 mark first, stair step it up. But it's like, but we were at, I think 66% of our transactions were buy sides. So that, to me, when you're trying to look, if listings control the market and you're lopsided on that side, that to me is a problem that needs to be fixed.
Got it.
And so changing everyone's behavior, including leadership's focus,
Yep.
is important. And it's not about you can't even point out little tiny things. I mean, yeah, we're focusing the different types of coaching, different types of accountability, different types of training, but there is an exact thing you can pinpoint on something that says, oh, that was the one that drove the listings up, or that's the thing that did it,
Right.
because it's a bunch of different behaviors and actions that are happening that I said, trust me, team, if you start leading this way,
Yeah.
things will start moving that way. And they are.
It
And
really.
it'd be interesting to see what the end of the second quarter looks like, because some of them are behind. Not
Mhm.
everyone is doing the same results, and see, but the nice thing about that is that there's other ones that are struggling, are seeing the success. So they know it can be done,
It can be
and
done.
they've got a team of people that can help them do it.
Well, I mean, the beauty of that, I mean, there's so many, there's so much. We could talk about this for the entire rest of our time, Stephen, because there's so much richness in this, of not only this idea of of detaching from the outcome, like setting the goal, but let's not get fixated on the goal because we can get overwhelmed by this. Oh my gosh, how are we going to reach the top of that mountain? I mean, it's so high. How do we do it? You're like, no, no, no. We're gonna like forget about that because if we focus on what we've got to do today, and here are the set of behaviors, here are the actions, you need to do X, Y, and Z today. And if you do X, Y, and Z today and show up again tomorrow and do that again, and the next day and do that again, right? We
Mhm.
will end up. It's inevitable that we will continue to move toward that big vision, which I think is huge. And I saw that firsthand in racing where teams would set a big goal of like we want to win a championship or finish in the top 10 in points, but how do we do that? And they would break it down to, well, we need X number of pole positions, X number of top fives, X
Mhm.
number of wins, X number of, or they would break down all the action steps, and the team all saw where they fit in and played a part in that. And everyone can rally around that. And what's cool too is, it's one of those things where they say like no one believes it until they see it. And then when they see it, they're
Yep.
like, it can be done, and it just takes a couple of people on your team to say, "Hey, Steven, we're with you on this, and we're gonna lean in." And sure enough, even the naysayers start to look at it and go, "Oh, these things
No,
here. Sorry about that." But
that's like, yeah, I can never figure those things out. I'm like, yeah.
oh man, forget it. So I love that you detach from the outcome. You actually broke this down into the process, the unconventional approach to say, hey, look, we could sit here and wonder how are we going to get to this place, but we're going to look at a baseline and say, look, just to break even, we need to have, let's look at the numbers. Now we've got some benchmarks to go after, right?
Yeah, we
Some
even created a,
milestones.
what was really interesting about this, and it was a good lesson for my leadership team, was like we created this listing tracker. Every Monday, you had to go in and enter what that office did. It was
Nice.
interesting when Monday come around, I would go to it and some of them weren't filled out. And my comments back to them when we have weekly meetings is like, if you're not filling this out, if you're not focused on it, what else isn't happening? Because
Yeah.
this is a pretty simple task. You go in, you see what it was, you enter it into the
Yeah.
listing tracker so
Yeah.
that I can see it and the whole team can see how we're tracking as a company. But if you're not filling it out, what else isn't happening? And so I think that was a good lesson. They started to catch on, like, wait a minute, this little action of putting that number in that box is super
Matters.
important in
Matters.
shifting that behavior.
Yeah.
Because if they're not focused, if they're not coming in on Monday saying, okay, what do we do, and get excited about putting that number in there, or maybe not excited, maybe they don't like that number,
Yeah.
but that to me, it's changing that behavior,
Without a
right?
doubt. Hey, I don't like that number today. So what am I going to do today to change that number for tomorrow instead of getting, hung up? I love that. I mean, there's no shortcut for consistency, right? And time as you're building. And like you said, hey, this is going to take every bit of 2 years. But wow, how far you will have gone, and more importantly, shifted the trajectory of the business and the behavior of how you're going to get there. And in the market you're in, man, that's the part that's like blows my mind where so many people I'm sure are just sitting there getting, their actions are dictated by the headlines and the doom and the gloom, and they're going to buy into it, you know? So
Yep.
with that, the last question I've got, because this is really about leadership and the principles that we apply, I'm curious though, is there a leadership principle that make contradict conventional wisdom a little bit, but seems to always pay off for you, or something that you've learned to lean into, whether it's a mantra, whether it's a behavior. I'm curious. Anything that's kind of been like counterintuitive that's worked for you?
I like to think it's not counterintuitive or different, but I'm more of a bottom up kind of leader. Like I've got a team. I'm a little unorthodox in the way I'm set up. In fact, of all there's lots of real estate companies out there and lots of owners. I have found myself to be pretty unique in our industry where in the market where I live and where I have some offices, I'm 100% owner. I own it. In my other markets, when I get outside here, I have partners. And so
Yeah.
now I have, not only do I have managers in different offices, then you have different partners. So now you've got um, different owners, if you will. So they have a different stake. And the reason I do that is because and then when I'm in these different markets, someone has skin in the game,
Yep.
right? If they want to eat, right? When you have I just believe there's a little bit more attachment to something when, you if you're not making profit, you don't literally put food on the table,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
And so with that said, what we do is, as a everyone's empowered at their role. And what's been interesting about that for me is that different talents come to surface, different people take on different responsibilities
Mhm.
because they see the benefit of helping the team as a whole.
Yep.
And what's really interesting, even though they might not have ownership in another market, they're helping doing work for that other market because they see the benefit of what it's doing as a whole for the company. So the team itself that I've created works together very closely as a team and helps each other because they see the benefit of what's happening. It's very rare that I'll do a top down type approach to something. I'll do it when it's necessary or when I'm asked to by the team, but generally, I like full consensus with everyone when we're doing something, especially something as major as, you know, like a year and a half ago, recruiting does solve all problems. They came and rehired a recruiter, even though no one was spending money on those types of things. And even though my team we were battling, do you hire a trainer or do you hire a recruiter? I'm like, we need a recruiter
Yeah.
kind of thing. Over most of the time, I would say, over 90% of the time, the team makes the decision, the
Mm,
team carries forward.
I love it.
I think that's really important. I think I feel like a lot of times I can completely step away
Mhm.
and I don't have to worry about the organization because they all feel some sense of ownership on the leadership team. I don't get as stressed or as bothered when I step away for something. Like even being away at the conference last week at the leadership retreat, it didn't concern me what was happening back at home because
Mhm.
the team that did stay behind, I know they got it, and
Yeah.
they're empowered to make decisions. They have because they've been in that role too. They're confident in making those decisions on their own without needing to say, "Hey, I need to ask
I
Steven
need this
or I need
I
to
need
ask
to
so
check
and
in.
so before I do it. I'm just going to go ahead and do it." I'm a big ask for forgiveness guy too. I've always done that. I'd rather you sometimes take action versus no action.
Yeah.
Uh, Sometimes lack of action causes a lot more pain because we're just hesitate on making a decision. And so sometimes you got to make that decision, right or wrong.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't know what the outcome's going to be until we have the outcome. And I think I've made a lot of mistakes. Um, through this business, but through them, it's made me a better leader. It's helped me evaluate things a little bit differently than I might have would have if I didn't make those mistakes.
Yep. Yep.
And so I think letting people make those decisions or have that role and figuring it out along the way is not always a bad thing.
Well,
Um,
it's not if again the culture and the environment is supporting that. Like your actions are backing up your words. It's one thing when you see a leader say, "Go out there and make a decision." Yes, go ahead. I trust you, and then they do, and maybe it's the wrong one, and suddenly that leader's like, "What are you doing?" They're like, "Well, you told me I could." So you've got to back up. And even if they do make the mistake as a leader, and I'm sure you do, you take that time to coach them. It's not about blame or belittling. It's like, okay, well, let's go back and go through it again because I want to see you succeed, and that's the type of environment where you do have people, like I said, you can step away from the business and you're not stressed out. It's
yeah,
powerful. That's powerful.
not that we don't have stress in our industry right now, but
Well,
it's it's been interesting. But it's like you've got to have a good team in place, and I think that's one of the things I am fortunate. And it's that goes back to that picking the right people,
yes.
and not necessarily. It's not all about always the experience or where they've been. It's like where do you think they're going, and
Yeah.
that's sometimes hard to predict or
Mhm.
to sometimes you have to go with your gut a little bit on that.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of leaders could benefit from focus on where the person's heading and not
Mhm.
where they've been.
Yeah.
Because where they've been can sometimes be an anchor, right? That's probably one of the lessons I learned. I was a consultant in my previous life, and I remember going into companies all the time, and the team would show up and they say, "I know exactly how to fix this." And I would question my leaders, and I'd be like, "How do you know? We've not even started talking with them." "Well, I've seen this before." I'm like, What do you mean you've seen this before?
Uh,
We haven't even spoken with you, man. So I always went into every situation like it was a blank slate and was eager to learn about them
yes.
because I didn't know what impact we could have on them. But if I had a preconceived notion of what it was going to be, guess what my actions were going to be like? They're going to follow that path,
Well,
and it was
that's
just the wrong path.
and that's
And
where leaders go, right? I mean,
and
that's the difference. Yeah.
yeah, and you've got I think as leaders, you gotta look at where can that person take us?
Yep.
What trajectory they have? Their past experience, although a lot of times very valuable,
Yep.
can sometimes not be a good thing for you. It depends on what you need at that time. And so,
Right.
um, you know, you know, the person I put in this role actually is my my top performing manager never sold one piece of real estate. So
There you go. Case in point. Case in point. I mean, it's leading with curiosity, you know, and man, I've loved this conversation because there's so many actionable insights here that you've shared, and I'm grateful for that. Thank you. And I know the listeners are the people who are watching are. I mean, things about control the controllables, right? What is it that we can control? Believing in talent and cultivating that, right? This idea of detaching from the outcomes, identify the goal, but work backwards to the actionable steps. So powerful. Getting the commitment from the team to step into that, having that sense of ownership and empowerment. And I think the last nugget you dropped there is just so incredible for leadership, especially as we're looking at talent, is not where they've been, but where are they heading? Like taking the time to think about where could this person be going? What's the trajectory? How can I help them get there? Stephen, this has been fantastic, and it's clear as why as to why in these tumultuous times you're in your industry, but your business continues to not just grow but thrive. And it sounds like you've got a team in there that is absolutely like all in this epic team. I mean, they're living out the core principles of that excellence and presence, and intentionality and curiosity, absolutely under your leadership, man. So thank you so much. Really appreciate all of
no,
this
thank you.
insight.
It's been a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, for you joining us and listening in, thank you so much. If you have some thoughts or ideas or feedback, comments you want to share, please put it in the comments below. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Your Epic Pursuit. Thank you so much.